The man in booth 7 hadn't touched his coffee in 20 minutes, and Mara Jennings had learned a long time ago what that kind of stillness meant. She set down a fresh cup, warm this time, and slid a folded napkin beside it before she turned away. He didn't open it until she was gone. Inside, in handwriting that still had a little girl's careful loops, it said, "Whatever it is, it's not the end of you. Eat. It's on me tonight." Tucked behind the napkin was $2, her own money, the last of her tip jar from a slow Tuesday. She had no idea that the man reading it controlled 41 restaurants across 3 states, and that her small kindness was about to collide with his entire life. Mara had worked the graveyard shift at Ruthie's Diner off Route 9 for 6 years, ever since she was 19 and needed something, anything to keep the lights on after her mother's illness ate through their savings. Ruthie's wasn't glamorous. Cracked vinyl booths, a jukebox that only half worked, coffee that tasted the same at 2 a.m. as it did at 2 p.m. But it was steady, and steady was what Mara needed. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat with her 8-year-old son, Eli, and a photo of her mother on the nightstand that she talked to more than she'd admit. She wasn't the kind of person who noticed she was being kind. She just was. Regulars knew her by the way she remembered their order before they said it, by the way she'd slip an extra pancake onto a truck driver's plate when he looked especially worn down, by the way she never once, in 6 years, let a customer eat alone in silence if they looked like they needed someone to just be present. The diner's owner, a heavyset man named Dale Rudiger who'd inherited the place from his father, didn't share her generosity. Ruthie's was bleeding money. Rent had gone up twice in 2 years. A competing 24-hour chain restaurant had opened 4 blocks away with brighter lights and a parking lot that didn't flood every spring, and Dale was 3 months behind on the walk-in freezer lease. He wasn't a cruel man, not really. He was a frightened one, and fear has a way of curdling into meanness when it goes unspoken long enough. He'd started docking waitstaff pay for unauthorized comps, free meals, extra sides, anything that came off a ticket without his sign-off. He'd posted a laminated sign by the register, "No freebies, management discretion only." Mara had gotten 2 written warnings already that year, both for feeding people who couldn't pay. The second one came with a threat. One more, and she was out. She knew all of this on the night the stranger walked in. She gave him the coffee and the napkin anyway. His name, though she didn't know it yet, was Thomas Bellwether, and 3 days earlier his world had come apart with the kind of speed that leaves a person unable to recognize their own reflection. His company, Bellwether Hospitality Group, had built its name on family-style restaurants that promised warmth and consistency, 41 locations strong, a name his own father had started in a single diner not unlike Ruthie's. But an internal audit had just surfaced something Thomas hadn't seen coming. His COO and closest friend of 15 years, a man named Victor Alcott, had been quietly siphoning funds through shell vendor contracts for the better part of 3 years. Nearly $6 million. Worse, when confronted, Victor hadn't denied it. He'd smiled, almost pitying, and told Thomas that empires this size always had a little rot in the foundation. That Thomas had simply been too soft, too trusting, too busy caring about the little people at every store to notice what was happening at the top. The board was demanding answers. The press had caught the scent, and Thomas, for the first time since he was 26 years old, had gotten in his car with no security detail, no assistant, no destination, and driven until the exhaustion outweighed the panic. He ended up 90 miles from his own headquarters, in a diner he'd never heard of, wearing a rumpled coat that didn't look like it belonged to a man worth hundreds of millions, because at that moment he didn't feel like that man at all. He felt like someone who had built his life on trusting people, and had just watched that trust get used against him by the one person he never questioned. He sat in booth 7 and ordered black coffee, because it was the only thing he could stomach, and he stared at it, turning the whole wreck of his life over in his mind, until a waitress with tired eyes and a gentle voice set down a warmer cup and walked away without asking him a single question he didn't want to answer. He read the napkin twice, then a third time. He put the $2 bill in his coat pocket like it was something rare, and he watched her for the rest of her shift. The way she moved between tables with an ease that had nothing to do with performance. The way she crouched down to talk to an elderly man's level so he wouldn't have to look up. The way she quietly boxed up a to-go plate for a teenager who'd only ordered water, and pretended it was a kitchen mistake so he wouldn't have to accept charity outright. Thomas Bellwether had spent 15 years building a company on the idea that this, exactly this, unglamorous and unpaid and unnoticed, was what hospitality actually meant. He'd forgotten what it looked like in its purest form, before boardrooms and quarterly earnings calls had smoothed it into a brand slogan. Watching Mara reminded him. He came back the next night, and the night after that. He never told her who he was. He asked her name, and she told him, Mara, and he asked why she did what she did, and she just shrugged and said, people don't need much most of the time, just somebody to notice. On his fourth visit, Dale caught her comping a slice of pie for a woman who'd been crying quietly at the counter, and it was the final straw. Dale pulled Mara into the back office while Thomas sat, unnoticed, close enough to hear every word through the thin wall. I told you, Dale said, his voice cracking with the particular exhaustion of a man watching his father's legacy slip through his fingers. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep the lights on if you keep giving my restaurant away. I don't want to fire you, Mara. I like you, but I've got nothing left to give either. He wasn't a villain in that moment. He was a man drowning, grabbing at the only lever he had left to pull. Mara didn't argue. She untied her apron, folded it neatly, and set it on his desk, because 6 years of pride wasn't going to let her beg for a job that was choking a man just as much as it was feeding her son. She walked out the back door into the cold, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she let herself cry in the parking lot where no customer could see her. Thomas found her there, sitting on the curb by her car, a 15-year-old sedan with a check engine light that had been on for 2 years because she couldn't afford to look at what it meant. He didn't offer money, not yet. He sat down on the curb beside her, a stranger in a rumpled coat, and he said the only true thing he had left in him that week. I lost something this week too. Someone I trusted for 15 years took something from me and smiled while he did it. And the only person who's made me feel like the world still makes sense is a waitress who gave a stranger $2 she couldn't spare. Mara looked at him for a long moment, and something in his exhaustion mirrored her own closely enough that she didn't feel the need to perform strength. Then I guess we're both starting over tonight, she said. He told her the truth 2 days later, not in the parking lot but at a proper table, because he wanted her to see his face when he said it, and know it wasn't a trick. He told her about Bellwether Hospitality, about Victor, about the $6 million and the board meeting scheduled for the following week, where he intended to walk in and clean house, starting from the top. And he told her he wanted to buy Ruthie's, not to swallow it into a franchise, not to change a single cracked vinyl booth, but to save it, and to save Dale's job in the process, on one condition, that Mara run it. Not as a waitress, as the general manager, with the authority to comp a coffee for a stranger who needed one, without a single laminated warning sign ever going up again. Mara didn't cry this time. She laughed, disbelieving, the kind of laugh that comes out when a person has spent so long bracing for bad news that good news doesn't register right away. I gave you $2, she said. You're offering me a restaurant. Thomas shook his head. You gave me the first honest kindness I'd received in 15 years that didn't come with an invoice attached. The restaurant is interest on the debt. Dale, when Thomas met with him privately and laid out the freezer lease, the back rent, and a partnership structure that let him keep an ownership stake instead of losing everything, wept at his own kitchen table. Not from shame, but from the specific relief of a man who thought he'd already lost and discovered the story wasn't finished. Victor Alcott, for his part, was removed from the company within the month, the $6 million clawed back through a court settlement, his name quietly scrubbed from 15 years of shared history. He faced no easy forgiveness from Thomas, only the cold, procedural consequences that 15 years of misplaced trust had finally caught up to. Ruthie's reopened under new lighting 6 weeks later, the same cracked booths reupholstered but not replaced, the jukebox finally fixed, a small brass plaque by the door that read simply, "Kindness is never off the menu." Mara kept a framed copy of her own napkin note behind the register, not out of vanity, but as a reminder to every new hire that the smallest gesture in the room is sometimes the only thing holding someone together. Eli got to see his mother come home standing taller than he'd ever seen her. And on quiet nights, when a tired stranger sat alone in booth 7, Mara still walked over with a warm cup of coffee and no questions asked, because some things about her hadn't changed at all, and some things about her never would. What this story leaves us with is simple and worth sitting with for a moment. We rarely know what someone is carrying when we choose to be kind to them, and we almost never know what carrying that kindness back to them might set in motion. $2 and a napkin didn't buy Mara a restaurant. Her character did. The money was just how the world finally noticed. If this story moved you tonight, stay a little longer with us. There's another one waiting, and somewhere in it, I think you'll find a piece of yourself, too.